Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. Before I get started, if you would like to leave a comment, you will have to do so on my YouTube community page because YouTube disables my comments. And I also ask that you would like, share, and subscribe if you find this video to be helpful. So today I'm going to be doing another video for those newer homeschooling parents who might be feeling a little overwhelmed about what seems like an enormous task to them. I want you to breathe a little bit, and we're going to talk about covering all the subjects. Sometimes when you are a newer homeschooling parent and you are looking at your state homeschool laws and the list of subjects that have to be covered, it can be intimidating at first glance. For those of you who live in states that do not have regulations like this, I'm just going to tell you, you are blessed. I wish that I lived in a state like that, and I actually try to get my husband to move to them all the time. But you don't need to be stressed if you do live in a state that has a list of subjects, because even though it looks like a really long list and you might be counting in your head the number of hours that you're going to spend homeschooling your children, you need to take a step back, you need to breathe, and we need to talk about a few things. So as far as I know now, I do not know all of the state homeschool requirements, but as far as I know, and you can leave a comment on my community page if you do live in a state that makes you homeschool like certain subjects every single day or tells you specifically how long you have to do it for. But as far as I know, there is no state that will tell you how many days a week each subject has to be covered or how long you have to spend doing each subject every day. Now, again, I could be wrong. If I am, please let me know on my community page. But yeah, as far as I know, there is no requirement. The requirement is just that you cover those subject areas. It does not tell you how often you have to do them. It doesn't tell you what ways you have to cover them. It doesn't tell you what materials you have to use. All it tells you is that you have to cover them. So what this means is that if you are panicking over the fact that you have to cover language arts and math and history and science and gym and health with your kids every day, stop and listen. You don't need to do all of those subjects every day. Even if you are using a textbook approach for your children. Now, I have to just add this in here right now. I've been homeschooling 12 years now, and we started out with a more textbook-driven approach. And what I can tell you from my own personal experience, now some people might differ because every homeschooling family, has their own experience. But from what I have learned from using textbooks, the textbook-driven approach to homeschooling is by far the most complicated and the most time-consuming way to homeschool. I will just get that out of the way right away. However, even if you do choose to homeschool with a separate textbook for every single subject, you need to remember that you don't need to do every single one of those subjects every day. A lot of schools will only do social studies twice a week and maybe science twice a week. You could certainly adopt something like that. You might want to spend one day a week where you're doing like a bunch of history, and you might push some of the other subject areas off to other days. It doesn't matter what days you are covering these subjects, only that they get covered. So remember that. You don't need to spend your day doing seven different subject areas with your kids. You don't have to do that. And what I also have to say is that just because you don't have a subject structured in for your homeschool day doesn't mean that it will not be covered in other subjects. Does that confuse you a little bit? Well, here are some examples. So sometimes when you are learning history, you might be learning, for example, about Thomas Edison or Benjamin Franklin. You will also be learning about some of their scientific inventions. So just because you are not doing your science textbook that day, if you are learning about Thomas Edison or Benjamin Franklin or something else like that, you are covering science as well. And I'm going to say this again, just because you don't have that subject structured into your day or written into your lesson plan doesn't mean that it does not count for covering it. The same thing goes when my oldest daughter, and a lot of people think about these things with elementary school, but they don't realize that it also moves on to high school. Like when my daughter was doing chemistry for high school, I remember the one time I was helping her with it, and she was doing all kinds of equations in chemistry. And I finally looked at her and I said to her, you know what? You don't need to do math today because you just did a bunch of math right here. And that is really the beauty of homeschooling, is that you can be flexible like this. And there are a lot of times that you are going to be covering more than one subject, even if you don't mean to. I also have to add in that a lot of those things that your children will be doing on their own do count as those school subjects. That's another thing. The subject areas that you are teaching to your children do not have to be taught in a schoolish way. There are lots of families out there who unschool. They pretend that school doesn't even exist. They don't do anything that even looks anything like school, yet unschooling is legal. And yes, their children are learning every subject because life is all encompassing. So if you do have a child that may not have done science for the day, but then goes out back after they're done with their lessons and maybe catches some butterflies or digs for worms or goes wading through a creek, they are covering science. Or even if they sit down and watch a documentary, or even like Brave Wilderness on YouTube, that is science. Or if you have a child maybe who didn't do history that day, and they did cover science, but they didn't do history, but then afterwards they might again watch documentary, or they might sit down and maybe color in a Civil War coloring book, because my kids have those Dover coloring books that cover like different historical eras. Depending on your child's age, if you have a younger child and they play house after they're done with their schoolwork, that is social studies, because they are covering and learning about family dynamics as they are playing house. So you really need to be creative, and you need to open up your eyes to the education that is all around your children. The education, it doesn't just come out of those textbooks. In fact, most of your child's real education is not going to come from those textbooks anyway. It's going to come from the things that happen to them in life, the things that they encounter, the experience that they have. So really, don't stress yourself out over what seems like a huge list of homeschool subjects to cover, because I am telling you, life covers them all. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram, because as I said, YouTube disables my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.